The silent pain. No one talks about, but you feel every day. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It doesn't bleed. It doesn't leave visible scars. But it lives inside you, silently. It doesn't disrupt your schedule or cause people to worry. It doesn't stop you from working, smiling, showing up, but it steals something else. Your connection, your spark, your sense of being fully alive. You feel it in the quiet moments when the noise settles and distractions fade. You feel it at night when you're supposed to rest, but instead stare at the ceiling. You feel it in the middle of conversations, wondering why your laughter feels fake. You feel it when everything's fine, but nothing feels right. This pain is invisible, but heavy. It doesn't draw sympathy because it's hard to explain. It hides behind your polite answers, your well-rehearsed, "I'm good," your endless to-do list. You wear it like a second skin, even when no one notices you do. Every single day. You're not alone in this. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're just tired, not from working too hard, but from disconnecting too long. Carl Jung called this the condition of the divided self. A person who lives outwardly, but not inwardly. Who shows up in the world as a role, a mask, while their true self waits silently in the background, unseen. This silent pain is your true self trying to come back. It doesn't yell, it whispers, it doesn't demand. It waits, patiently, for you to stop running. You weren't born to live this way. You weren't born to be efficient, productive, well-behaved, and emotionally numb. You were born to feel, to create, to love with depth, to live with meaning. But somewhere along the way, you lost that thread. And now, the silence inside you is too loud to ignore. You may look around and see others performing just fine. They're building careers, raising families, hitting goals. So you think, maybe it's just me. But it's not. Millions of people are carrying this silent weight. Because the world has taught us how to succeed, but not how to feel. How to strive, but not how to rest. How to connect on screens, but not with ourselves. And when the soul is neglected for too long, it speaks, not through words, but through sensation. An ache in your chest, a tightness in your throat, a sense that something vital is missing, and you can't name it, because it's not something out there you can chase. It's something in here you've forgotten. You've probably tried to ignore it, to stay busy, to tell yourself everything is fine, to numb it with scrolling, eating, working, planning. And for a while, maybe it worked. But now, the mask is slipping. The silence is louder than ever. And your body, your heart, your soul are asking for truth. That's not failure. That's awakening. Awakening doesn't begin with joy. It begins with discomfort. It begins when what used to work no longer does. And that's where you are, on the edge of remembering who you really are. The ache you feel is not here to harm you. It's here to guide you. It's a signal, not a sentence. It's trying to say, come back, back to your breath, back to your center, back to what matters. You don't need to change everything overnight. You don't need to quit your job, move away, or have all the answers. You just need to be honest with yourself about how you feel, about what you've lost, about what you're longing for. Start there. Say out loud, something doesn't feel right and I'm ready to listen. That's it. That's the first step. When you say those words, something inside shifts. You give yourself permission to stop pretending, to stop forcing, to stop wearing a life that doesn't fit anymore. And suddenly the silence inside you begins to feel less threatening and more like an invitation. Because beneath the pain, beneath the ache, beneath the fog, there's a voice waiting to be heard. Your voice, not the one you use to please others, not the one shaped by expectation, but the one that remembers who you are, what you love, what matters to you, not to them. And that voice? It's been waiting your whole life to be heard. Once you start hearing that voice, your true voice, things begin to change, not all at once, and not always comfortably, but steadily. You begin to notice what drains you, what feels forced, what no longer aligns with your spirit. You start recognizing the moments when you're abandoning yourself, and it becomes harder to keep doing it. You become more sensitive, not weaker, but wiser. You feel more deeply, not to suffer, but to reconnect. You stop numbing because you realize the pain is part of the path. And in that process, something sacred happens. You begin to trust yourself again. It might feel strange at first. You've spent so long second-guessing, so long deferring to others, so long prioritizing approval over truth. But now, you begin to feel what's real. And even when it's uncomfortable, you don't want to trade that for the false safety of silence. Because truth, even when messy, is freeing. And in truth, you start to find peace. Not the kind of peace that looks perfect, but the kind that feels solid, rooted, honest. You stop running, you stop performing, you stop explaining yourself to people who never really saw you. And in that stillness, you meet something you'd forgotten, your essence. You remember the child you once were, before the world told you who to be. You remember the moments when you felt awe, when the smallest things lit you up, when you were fully present. You begin to realize that your soul has been trying to get back to that state. Not to be naive again, but to be whole. You start doing things not because they're impressive, but because they feel true. You let go of striving for a version of success that never felt like yours. You begin to define life on your own terms, and in doing so, you disappoint some people. You confuse others. You outgrow certain roles, relationships, even parts of your identity. But the cost of staying silent is higher than the cost of being misunderstood. So you choose truth anyway. This is the silent revolution, the quiet rebellion, where you stop chasing and start remembering. You become less concerned with proving and more curious about living. You ask deeper questions. What really matters? What am I here to create? What feels alive in me? And the answers don't come from books or experts or checklists. They come from within, from stillness, from presence, from honoring your pain as a teacher, not a flaw. It's in this space that healing begins, not as a destination, but as a practice. You notice your patterns. You sit with your triggers. You breathe through the discomfort instead of escaping it. And slowly, piece by piece, you reclaim your power. Not the loud kind, not the dominating kind, but the quiet kind that says, I know who I am. I know what I need. I don't have to apologize for either. You start trusting your timing. You release the urgency to arrive. You realize you're already on the path. And that path, it's sacred. Not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. You're no longer trying to escape the pain. You're letting it teach you. You're no longer afraid of being alone. You're discovering yourself in solitude. You're no longer chasing love outside of you. You're creating it within. You're coming home. To your breath. To your body. To your truth. And in that return, you begin to heal. Not by removing the pain, but by becoming the person who can hold it with compassion. You realize you don't need fixing. You need acceptance. You don't need a new identity. You need to remember the one you buried. You don't need to fight harder. You need to soften more. This is the quiet work, the invisible work, the real work. And it's happening right now inside you. If this journey feels familiar, if these words reflect something you've been carrying, then I invite you to explore deeper. There's a path called the Jung Method, a step-by-step guide to reconnecting with your unconscious, understanding your shadow, and reclaiming your soul's voice. You'll find the link pinned in the first comment, because you deserve more than just survival. You deserve aliveness. You deserve a life that doesn't just look good on the outside, but feels right on the inside. You deserve mornings where your chest feels light, conversations that nourish your spirit, work that reflects your values, rest that actually restores you, and that life, it's not a fantasy, it's a process, one that begins and continues with honesty. There's something that happens when you finally stop lying to yourself. Even if it's subtle, even if it's just one honest breath in the middle of a storm, your body relaxes, your spirit shifts, your soul exhales, because for the first time in a long time, you're not pretending. That's not a small thing. That's everything. You no longer force yourself to feel what you should. You don't rush to smile just to make others comfortable. You don't swallow your truth for the sake of being agreeable. Instead, you choose presence. You choose honesty. You choose to feel it all, the joy, the grief, the ache, the hope. And in that decision, even if it's quiet, something starts to bloom. You begin to see life differently, not through the lens of lack or fear, but through awareness. You notice how much energy you used to spend avoiding yourself, how often you twisted your voice to match what others expected, how deeply you feared being too much or not enough. But now, you're done apologizing for being sensitive. You're done shrinking to fit, because you've realized your depth is not a flaw, it's your compass. The ache you carry is not weakness. It's the echo of your authenticity calling you back. And that voice, the one you used to silence, is becoming louder, stronger, truer. You no longer want a life that's only beautiful in photos. You want something real, the kind of beauty that can't be filtered, the kind of success that feels aligned, the kind of love that doesn't require you to disappear. You stop chasing what looks good, and you start choosing what feels right. That changes everything. Your schedule, your relationships, your rituals, your values. You become intentional, not in a rigid way, but in a sacred way. You realize, I don't need to fill every hour to feel valuable. I don't need to prove anything to be worthy. I don't need to perform wellness. I need to experience it. This is where you begin to find rhythm again. Not a pace dictated by pressure, but by intuition. You rest when your body asks. You speak when your truth stirs. You move when your spirit says, now. You're no longer driven by fear of falling behind, because you finally understand. You're not in competition. You're in conversation with your soul, with life, with the mystery, and in that space, growth happens differently. It's not measured by speed, but by depth, by alignment, by peace. You find yourself drawn to simplicity, to moments that are soft, slow, and honest, a quiet cup of tea, a long walk without a destination, a deep conversation that lingers. You stop needing everything to be more followers, more noise, more goals, because you've touched a deeper more presence, more clarity, more inner spaciousness. And that kind of abundance? No one can sell it to you. No one can take it away. It's yours, because you remembered who you are. Of course, not everyone understands this shift. Some people like the version of you that overgave, that performed, that stayed quiet. And when you stop doing that, you'll face resistance. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something different. You're choosing integrity over image. And that threatens the systems that rely on your silence. But you keep going. You let go of relationships that no longer nourish. You redefine success in ways that honor your soul. You protect your energy as an act of devotion. And even when it's hard, even when you feel lonely, you don't go back to who you used to be, because even in the discomfort, you feel real. And that feeling, that's worth everything. Sometimes, healing isn't a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's a flicker, a soft pulse that says, you're not the same, you're becoming. You catch yourself being kind to your body, being patient with your emotions, being honest with your needs. You stop demanding perfection. You stop pretending to be unaffected. You stop holding your breath, and you realize you're finally breathing. You're finally here, not lost in the future, Not stuck in the past, but grounded, awake, alive. There's no final destination, no arrival point where everything clicks into place forever. But there's momentum, there's movement, there's meaning. And every time you choose yourself, every time you pause instead of push, every time you say yes to your soul and no to your conditioning, you become more whole, more centered, more free. And that freedom, it's not loud, it's not flashy, it's quiet, it's deep, it's yours. By now, you've learned something most people never do, that the real work isn't about achieving more, it's about remembering more, remembering what you are, what you need, and what you no longer have to carry. You've walked through the fog of numbness. You've faced the ache that had no name. You've sat with the silence instead of filling it, and in doing so, you uncovered yourself. Maybe it was subtle. Maybe you didn't even notice it happening at first. But now you feel it, the way your shoulders rest lower, the way your breath reaches deeper, the way your words carry more weight. Not because they're louder, but because they're true. That is what healing looks like. It's not some dramatic breakthrough. It's not a single moment where everything is suddenly fixed. It's this, a quiet returning, a slow unfolding, a sacred remembering. You're not there yet. You're not finished. But you're real, and that matters more than you know. You've stopped searching for who you should be, and started listening to who you've always been. You've stopped running from the pain, and started understanding it as part of your personal myth. You've learned to sit with discomfort, not because it's pleasant, but because that's where your deepest truths live, and that changes everything. You begin to live differently, not perfectly, not always gracefully, but consciously. You notice what activates you, and instead of reacting, you get curious. You see your shadows, and instead of hiding them, you invite them in. You hear your fear, and instead of pushing it away, you ask what it needs. You stop pretending to be above it all. You stop pretending you're unaffected. You stop pretending that pain makes you broken, because now you know, pain makes you human. And presence makes you whole. You create new rituals, not because someone told you to, but because your soul asked for them. You take walks without your phone. You sit in silence without rushing to fill it. You create space, not just in your calendar, but in your body, your mind, your home. You let go of things that don't resonate, not in anger, but in peace. You stop trying to convince others of your worth. You stop begging to be seen. Because you've finally looked at yourself, honestly, gently, fully, and you realize you are enough. Not because you proved it, but because you remembered it. The world hasn't changed, but you have. And that means you interact with life in a new way. You move slower, but with more clarity. You speak softer, but with more truth. You do less, but what you do matters. You're not chasing a version of yourself that fits someone else's story. You're writing your own, and in that story, you are the listener and the speaker, the wound and the healer, the student and the sacred teacher. That's what Jung meant by becoming whole. Not fixing, but integrating, not escaping the pain, but understanding it, not becoming someone else, but coming back to yourself. And now, when the silent pain visits again, because yes, it might, you meet it differently. You don't panic. You don't rush. You don't collapse. You breathe. You listen. You welcome it like an old friend. You say, I know you. I've sat with you before, and I've survived you before. You hold it gently. You give it space, and you let it soften, because you're not afraid of your pain anymore. You're not afraid of your truth. You're not afraid of the depth within you. And that is power. This is your path now. Not one of perfection, but one of presence. Not one of performance, but one of peace. Not one of pretending, but one of becoming. You are not lost. You are in the middle of a sacred remembering, and everything you feel, even the heavy parts, is part of the return. So keep going. Keep choosing truth over comfort. Keep choosing stillness over speed. Keep choosing yourself, especially when it's hard. You don't need to explain your path to anyone. The ones meant to walk with you will recognize the terrain. They'll feel the silence and not flinch. They'll see your depth and not run. And most importantly, you'll see yourself as whole, as worthy, as awake. So tonight, when the world goes quiet again, don't reach for distraction. Place your hand over your chest, close your eyes, and whisper, "I'm here, and I'm listening." Because the silent pain that once haunted you has become your doorway home. And now that you've walked through it, you'll never forget the way back.